WWE may have a serious problem on its hands after Shawn Michaels started revealing what really goes on behind the scenes. His comments have sparked a wave of reactions from fans, and some believe he's exposing things the company would rather keep hidden. On April 13, 2026, Peacock dropped The Heartbreak Kid, Becoming Shawn Michaels, a documentary that billed itself as an intimate look at Michaels' entire career, revealing his rise to fame, his superstardom in the wrestling ring, and his most personal stories outside the spotlight. On the surface, it looked like a glowing tribute piece, a celebration, another WWE-approved walk through the greatest hits. But what actually came out of it was something the company's PR machine wasn't fully prepared for. The documentary charts Michaels' story from his 12-year-old self dreaming of becoming a professional wrestler all the way to his current role cultivating talent as the Senior Vice President of Talent Development Creative for the NXT brand. Besides Michaels himself, participants included WWE Chief Content Officer Paul Triple H Levesque, The Undertaker, Kevin Nash, Bret Hart, Trick Williams, and Javon Evans, along with up-and-coming NXT stars Joe Hendry, Ethan Page, JC Jane, Sol Ruca, and Shawn Spears. That roster of voices is significant because when you have legends like Bret Hart and The Undertaker sitting down to discuss Shawn Michaels and the current state of WWE talent development, and you give them a platform, there's no controlling what comes out. And some of what came out landed with the force of sweet chin music. Matt Bloom, the Performance Center's top coach, laid out what the center does, while Triple H spoke about the idea behind it, training people better and enticing talent from other sports. Then Michaels himself walked into frame, and the senior manager of talent development operations recalled not even letting him in on his first day, not recognizing the man in cutoff shorts and flip-flops. Triple H said Shawn can understand recruits on every level. NXT Vice President and lead writer Johnny Russo noted how Michaels can connect from an in-ring standpoint, but also reaches new talent on a human level. The warmth of those testimonials was real, but it also raised a silent alarm. Because the more people spoke about how personal and emotionally connected this system had become, the more the gaps in that system started to show. Joe Hendry, sitting as an NXT superstar himself, told the camera that Shawn has time for everyone, and that it's hard to remember sometimes because he's the greatest of all time. That sentiment is genuine. But it also sits right next to the truth that even the greatest of all time, running a system designed to produce the next generation of superstars, is facing problems that no amount of personal charm can solve on its own. Bret Hart's presence, in particular, raised eyebrows. His relationship with Shawn Michaels is one of the most documented, most complicated, most politically charged feuds in wrestling history. Having Hart speak about Michaels in a WWE-produced documentary was already a loaded decision. Add in the ongoing rumors, fueled in part by Hart himself, about darker chapters in WWE's past, and the documentary became less of a tribute reel and more of a pressure cooker. It was noted as a bit of a surprise that, given how involved WWE is with Netflix these days, a documentary would appear on Peacock instead. But the company appears to be making new content for both platforms. That split in streaming strategy is itself a symptom of a company in the middle of a very complicated transition. And Shawn Michaels, whether he intended it or not, became the documentary's most revealing voice. Not just about his own career, but about the cracks in the machine he now helps to run. The documentary traces his journey from a young dreamer to a global WWE superstar, covering key moments like the Rockers, his breakout singles run, and the rebellious D-Generation X era. But what makes it stand out is how openly it explores his struggles and eventual redemption, giving the story real emotional weight. That emotional weight? It didn't stay confined to the past. It bled straight into the present, and the present, it turns out, is where things got really complicated. Here's the thing about Shawn Michaels. He spent decades perfecting the art of saying the right thing at the right time. He survived the Attitude Era, survived the Montreal Screwjob fallout, survived personal demons that would have ended most careers, and came out the other side as one of the most respected figures in the wrestling business. He knows how to perform. On screen, behind a mic, in a promo, in an interview. So when he starts talking candidly, when the performer gives way to the executive, you pay attention to every word. Michaels recently spoke about the difficulties involved in developing WWE talent through NXT and preparing performers for the transition to the main roster. Speaking on What's Your Story with Stephanie McMahon, he reflected on his move from being an in-ring performer to helping guide WWE's next generation of talent behind the scenes. He explained that coaching talent at NXT involves far more than simply teaching wrestling fundamentals. And then, buried inside what sounded like a thoughtful reflection on his coaching philosophy, Michaels dropped something that cut right to the bone of what WWE is actually dealing with. He admitted on the show that it was a challenge to get a star ready for the main roster, especially when they don't have a pro wrestling background. And when asked how much time it would take him to get someone ready for the big stage, he responded that it would take a minimum of 3 years. 3 years? Minimum? Think about what that means in the context of a company that is continuously promoting talent to Raw and SmackDown, continuously depleting its NXT roster, and simultaneously trying to maintain NXT as a watchable, compelling TV product. The math doesn't work cleanly, and Michaels said as much. He discussed one of the major challenges facing WWE developmental, getting inexperienced athletes prepared for the demands of the main roster within a limited time frame. He recalled being asked how long it takes to get an athlete who doesn't know anything fully ready for the main roster. He continued by explaining that modern developmental talent simply don't have the same volume of in-ring experience previous generations received before reaching major promotions. That's not a minor administrative complaint. That's the head of WWE's developmental arm openly telling the world that the pipeline has a speed problem. Stars are being pushed up before they're ready, not because he wants it that way, but because the main roster's appetite for fresh talent doesn't wait for development timelines to complete. He also acknowledged the cultural shift in how WWE now trains talent, noting that the biggest thing that drove him in coaching was the idea that it doesn't have to be the over-the-top kind of tough love that we all got, while also recognizing there are people who would say the old way of being brought up was effective. He's essentially admitting that the training philosophy has been overhauled, but that the consequences of that overhaul, what you gain and what you lose, are still being worked out in real time. He believes his generation didn't have a safe space to express vulnerability, and he's actively trying to change that for the current generation of talents. Admirable, but it also confirms that the culture inside WWE's developmental system has shifted so dramatically from what produced legends like himself, that the two worlds barely resemble each other. Michaels came from a generation where performers often learned through instability, backstage politics, and emotional unpredictability. Now he helps oversee one of the most structured developmental systems wrestling has ever created. The contrast is everything. He survived a system that would break people. He's now building a system designed not to break anyone. And somewhere between those two philosophies, WWE is trying to figure out what kind of stars get produced, and whether they can carry the company the way the broken ones did. For years now, Michaels has been responsible for training and preparing the next generation of superstars for WWE. And as it turns out, the Heartbreak Kid has run into some problems when it comes to keeping up with the changing nature of relationships and friendships in NXT. Backstage drama in a wrestling locker room isn't new. That's practically a tradition. But when that drama starts bubbling up on live TV in ways that nobody planned for, when Shawn Michaels has to physically walk to the ring to resolve a situation in front of a live crowd, that's when things cross a different kind of line. On a recent episode of NXT, Michaels had to come down to the ring himself to resolve an issue between Kendall Gray and Lola Vice. In the main event, Kendall won the match via pinfall, but also tapped out to Lola at the same time. Two referees, two separate outcomes. Both of them technically correct. Both of them simultaneously creating a main event finish that had no clean resolution. The official match referee, Derek Sanders, had made 3 counts for Kendall's pin over Lola. Meanwhile, at ringside, another referee, Adrian Butler, had seen that Gray also tapped out to Vice from the side. The head of NXT Creative had to walk out and stand in the middle of the ring, in front of a New York crowd, while his staff tried to figure out what the show's main event actually meant. The crowd popped for him when he walked out, but the creative head of NXT was in the ring, working through how to go ahead with it now. That's a polite way of saying the show ended in a fog of confusion, with the man whose name is on the whole operation staring at a problem none of the planning had accounted for. But that wasn't even the most combustible NXT botch situation of recent months. The huge miscommunication in another NXT match had led to a lot of last-minute changes for WWE and was not a good look. According to Fightful Select, Blake Monroe was injured and unhappy about how the bout panned out. She was legitimately hurt and got the wind knocked out of her, leading to a slow and late kickout that ultimately forced a 3 count from the referee. And here's where Michaels' position becomes genuinely difficult. The outlet also reported that NXT head booker Shawn Michaels apparently thought the referee did the right thing, and the other referees on the brand, as well as Performance Center coach Matt Bloom, sided with the match official. So the talent was hurt, unhappy, and felt let down. The officials and leadership felt the call was correct. Sources claimed Blake Monroe said she was injured in her match with Thea Hale and was specifically unhappy about how things unfolded. And people who directly worked on her creative weren't happy either. That's a fracture running right through the heart of the locker room. And it's exactly the kind of thing that doesn't stay contained. These aren't whispers. These are Fightful Select reports, widely circulated, pulling back the veil on an operation that prides itself on being the most professional developmental system in wrestling history. Michaels has spoken about his approach to this kind of situation, drawing on how The Undertaker used to handle the locker room, not getting too caught up in the drama, just going out and handling business. He says he hears everything, who's dating, who broke up, and tries to stay focused on the show, the talent's development, and the product. That sounds like a man managing chaos with intention. It also sounds like a man describing a locker room that is generating an awful lot of noise. Michaels has explained his perspective on what separates NXT from every other wrestling operation in the world. He pointed to NXT's primary function as a developmental system as its defining characteristic, and then put it as plainly as it can be put. There's not another brand out there that works so hard to create stars in order to lose them. Everybody else builds stars to be able to draw money and ratings for their show. We do it to then send them off somewhere else. That is unlike any other brand, and it is part of the value NXT brings to the wrestling business as a whole. That framing is meant to sound like pride. And there is genuine pride in it, but taken in full context, alongside everything else Michaels has said about development timelines, about the NXT 2.0 backlash, about botched finishes, and locker room friction, it starts to sound like something else. It starts to sound like a man describing a system that is structurally set up to work against itself. Think about it. You spend 3 years, minimum, by Michaels' own admission, building a star from scratch. You navigate their personal growth, their in-ring development, their character work, their media training. You get them to a place where they're compelling on TV, where crowds care about them, where NXT's product looks strong because of them. And then you ship them to Raw or SmackDown and you start over. The 2025 and early 2026 period saw NXT lose Stephanie Vaquer, Oba Femi, and others to Raw and SmackDown, creating exactly the kind of roster vacancy that the revived Evolve brand was positioned to backfill. Michaels himself said WWE's revived Evolve brand has become one of NXT's most important behind-the-scenes assets, and the talents generating the most internal excitement are the ones nobody predicted would connect with audiences. Speaking with Peter Rosenberg on Cheap Heat during WrestleMania 42 weekend in Las Vegas, he explained how Evolve has functioned as a developmental safety net during a period when NXT has been sending significant talent to the main roster at an accelerated pace. A safety net. That's what Evolve is. Not a creative expansion, not a passion project, a safety net. For when NXT bleeds out its best performers faster than the system can replenish them. The fact that they need a sub-developmental territory to cushion NXT, which is itself a developmental territory. tells you something about the pace at which talent is being consumed. WWE increasingly develops talent through structured systems designed to maximize professionalism, consistency, and brand safety. But that transformation also creates tension around individuality and authenticity. And that tension has a very real cost. Rough unpredictability, strange charisma, and emotionally chaotic individuality. The kind that older wrestling generations often produce naturally, sometimes disappears in the process. Modern wrestling increasingly creates superior athletes while sometimes struggling to create unforgettable personalities. That's not an outside criticism, that is the logical conclusion of what Michaels himself has been describing. Across multiple interviews and the documentary, the system produces professionalism. It trains athletes, it conditions, brands, and media preps. What it can't guarantee, what no system can guarantee, is that it will produce the next Shawn Michaels, the next Steve Austin, the next character so raw and chaotic and impossible to ignore that the whole business bends around them. Modern wrestling increasingly behaves like a corporate athlete manufacturing ecosystem, where control, optimization, and scalability now shape future stars as much as charisma or unpredictability ever did. And the longer that evolution continues, the more wrestling may need to ask itself whether perfect systems can truly create imperfect legends memorable enough to define entire eras emotionally. Michaels, to his credit, seems to feel this tension personally. He acknowledged that the NXT roster understood what they were walking into during the most turbulent period, and noted that comparison is the death of progress, but said he was very proud of the individuals who understood what they were up against and used the pressure to drive themselves forward. That's a man trying to build gold under conditions that aren't always set up for it. To fully understand why Shawn Michaels' comments have hit the wrestling world the way they have, you need to go back to the NXT 2.0 era, because that's the wound that still hasn't fully healed. And Michaels spent a significant stretch of the documentary and subsequent interviews speaking about it more directly than he ever has before. Michaels opened up on multiple topics in a revealing set of comments, addressing everything from the controversial NXT 2.0 transition to behind-the-scenes details of his WrestleMania 25 Classic with The Undertaker. Speaking with Adrian Hernandez, he didn't dodge the criticism that followed the shift away from NXT's black and gold era, acknowledging that fans were vocal about the brighter presentation and new direction, but stressing that comparisons to the past are inevitable in wrestling. He positioned it as part of an inevitable cycle, the same thing people said when the Attitude Era ended, the same thing people say whenever wrestling changes. But what he also admitted, quietly, was that the backlash was real, and it landed on the shoulders of the talent themselves. He pointed specifically to talents like Braun Breaker, Trick Williams, and Carmelo Hayes, explaining how the criticism didn't break them, it pushed them. From his perspective, that pressure is part of the business and even necessary. He described how they heard the criticism and that for Carmelo and Javon, who were indie guys, it put a chip on their shoulder and made them want to work harder. They wanted to prove people wrong. That's a powerful story of resilience. But it's also an admission that these performers were placed into a product that the audience rejected, left to weather that rejection, and were expected to grow through it. That's a very particular kind of pressure to put on young talent who are still learning the business. And it's a significant contrast to the safe space philosophy Michaels espouses in his day-to-day coaching role. The NXT 2.0 era wasn't just a creative rebrand gone wrong. It was the moment where the tension between WWE's corporate optimization instincts and the need for organic, personality-driven wrestling boiled over in full public view. Michaels added that facing adversity early is essential in shaping talent, believing that those who endured the backlash are now stronger because of it, saying everybody has to face a little adversity in their careers, and those young men and women faced a lot of it early on, and I think they're better for it. He also reflected on his iconic WrestleMania 25 match against The Undertaker, revealing that the bout was originally planned with less time and placed earlier on the card. Michaels admitted both he and The Undertaker were frustrated with those initial plans. The match, of course, went on to be widely regarded as one of the greatest in WrestleMania history. That's the Shawn Michaels story in microcosm. Push back against the plan, deliver beyond expectation, redefine what's possible. That's also, notably, exactly the kind of unpredictable, instinct-driven outcome that his current structured system is not designed to produce. You can't manufacture a WrestleMania 25 moment on a production schedule. There was also the moment with Mustafa Ali that surfaced from NXT's creative process, a window into exactly how decisions get made and what happens when a talent doesn't agree with them. In an interview on Insight with Chris Van Vliet, Ali noted that Michaels didn't know he was going to be released in advance and was genuinely worried and concerned when the news hit. Despite no longer being a superstar, they remained in contact with the Hall of Famer, with Ali saying Michaels was always watching him. Ali recalled that before challenging Ethan Page, he didn't like the initial script given to him, as it didn't reflect well on his character. He made his case with Michaels, noting that his TNA character likes to politic, and that's the approach he should take, instead of making it dramatic and whiny. Although Michaels initially allowed Ali to go with his own script, he decided to stick with the original tone minutes before the segment. Ali told the Hall of Famer he thought he was wrong, but would still do it since he was told to. That's the dynamic in miniature. A creative head who is personally connected, emotionally invested, and genuinely cares about his talent, but is also operating inside a system that has final say. That doesn't always bend to individual preferences, and that sometimes makes calls that the people involved don't agree with. Shawn Michaels trying to hold together the humanity of the old school and the efficiency of the new school. And what the documentary, the confessions, the botch reports, the talent disputes, and the pipeline math all add up to is this. One of the biggest changes inside WWE over the past decade is how dramatically the company professionalized talent development. Earlier wrestling generations often emerged from fragmented territories, chaotic locker rooms, and inconsistent mentorship systems. Wrestlers developed through survival, adaptation, and real-world repetition across wildly different environments. Shawn Michaels lived that version. He was forged in it. And now wrestling legends teach future stars inside systems that barely resemble the worlds they originally survived themselves. That gap isn't a scandal, but it is a reckoning. Because when the man who ran through the fire tells you on camera, in a documentary, across multiple interviews, that getting someone ready for the main roster takes at minimum 3 years, that the product sometimes fails in real time, that he has to walk to the ring to fix what planning couldn't, that the best talents he's produced keep getting pulled away before the next wave is ready. That's not a crisis of spin. That's a structural truth about what WWE's most important creative pipeline is currently dealing with. The Heartbreak Kid always figured out a way to make it work. He's betting he can do it again.